Today, my class talked about learning and memory. And one of my favorite things about learning and memory is not the Pavlovian and the Skinnerian principles where it's all done externally, where you look at behavior and try to figure out what's going on, but like literally going inside the cell and seeing what's happening there. And this is where I think the power of neuroscience and neurobiology comes into play. It's like, you don't have to wonder what's going on. We know exactly what's going on. So there's these really cool principles called LTP, and LTP stands for long-term potentiation. And it basically is this idea that if you repeatedly stimulate bam, 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 one neuron, and it connects to another neuron, then that second neuron will be stimulated, right? I mean, that makes sense. But what's cool about it is if you go back the next hour or the next day and you stimulate that pathway again, even though, it's been a day since that pathway was used, the response in that second cell is stronger to a simple stimulation in the first cell, which basically is saying that that's how learning works. So there is something happening in that second cell that is basically saying, hey, I have a memory. I have a cellular memory that I have been stimulated in this way before, that I've gotten input from this pathway, that I've used this pathway, and I need to respond to it. This is important. All right. And we know that what's happening specifically are these two receptors that are on the second cell that respond to the neurotransmitter glutamate. And normally glutamate just binds to the second cell and it allows a whole bunch of sodium ions to go in, and the sodium ions say, hey, send a signal to that second cell. And that's a pathway. That's one neuron talking to another neuron in a circuit that can control behavior. But what happens is with learning and memory, you can have a second little receptor that sits in there. It's called NMDA. And the NMDA receptors are able to let sodium come in, but they also are able to let calcium come in. And this happens when they are repeatedly stimulated. All right. And so when the calcium comes in, calcium can do really cool things in that second cell that can allow the cell to change its gene transcription to make more, let's say, AMPA receptors to be able to respond to the glutamate coming in. Or it can basically say, hey, this synapse is getting a lot of attention and it's firing a lot. So we need to give more resources to it so that we can respond accordingly. It basically was a set of experiments done in sea slugs, of all things, that basically tell us, hey, cells have cellular memory. It's not this, memory isn't this thing that happens in some mystical way to us on our whole body level, but legitimately what's happening is one cell is remembering it's been used in this way before. And the science behind it is so strong that you can do this to a cell, stimulate it, use the pathway. And even if it's been weeks or months since that pathway has been used, when you stimulate it again, the cell will have a heightened response. Okay, and on a behavioral system, like the way that this translates up is that behaviors that we tell our kids are important, or we reinforce, or we just bring into the light, are the ones that when they use those synapses and use those pathways, those are the ones that they're going to be strengthened, and they're going to have a heightened response. They're going to feel like this is the way they should be working in their brains. Even if it doesn't happen again for, intermittently, it doesn't have to happen 10 minutes every day at this certain time. And this happens for math facts. This happens for who your kindergarten teacher is. This happens for where you live. This happens for really important life skills like empathy and problem solving and creativity and, how to fail and get back up and do it again. These are behavioral responses. And these neurons in these circuits underneath them are really primed and ready and adapted in such a quick and beautiful way to be able to respond appropriately in a quick way, because our bodies are saying, hey, these are important, pay attention. And so I think that it's just an amazing and beautiful system. So this work was done by Eric Kandel. He won the Nobel Prize for this. He's also a really lovely human being that I've had the opportunity to meet a couple of times. But this idea for parents that what we do matters, and it doesn't matter a little bit, and it doesn't matter if we can only do it here and there, those efforts are worthwhile, and keep trying. What you think is important, what you put in focus for your kid, it's making a difference on a neural level. It's changing the actual ions that flow in and out of that second cell. It's changing the response of that second cell and the first cell as well, so that they're actually building up those synapses and making them more robust, strengthening them, and weakening the synapses that don't get any attention. All right, so Carla Schatz was a neurobiologist who kind of summed up this by saying neurons that fire together wire together, and neurons that don't sync don't link. So when things happen and they happen at the same time, this synchronous activity will end up cementing these pathways. And when you don't use these pathways, you lose these pathways, which is a pretty good way to extinguish behaviors that we don't really want to see. We just kind of don't reinforce them. So anyway, thank you for listening. I really, I find it amazing that we've been able to figure out molecularly where the seat of learning is, not just say, oh, I think it's the hippocampus, but legitimately it's more than just two cells. It's the molecules that are actually beneath that second cell's response. They're so important for what we think of as learning and memory. All right, thanks. Join us every day in May for a new video.